Hello, and welcome to Compelling Conversations Where Law Meets Business. I'm Dara Rosenbaum, a founding partner and attorney at Rosenbaum and Taylor in New York. My own journey has shown me the power of learning from others, whether from their successes or their failures, and that's what led me to start this show. In each episode, my goal is to have a compelling conversation with a business leader, business owner, or other inspiring person who can share their experiences, their advice, and their perspective. I hope you'll learn from them and be inspired by them, just as I'm sure I will. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. My incredible guest today is Ben Albert. I'm going to give you a little bit of a longer bio so you have some context as to who Ben is and where he comes from. So when COVID hit, Ben was furloughed from work. He found himself down and out, staring at a half-empty handle of Jim Beam whiskey. He was unemployed, depressed, and felt unworthy. Hesitantly, he opened his laptop and started typing a bio and started reaching out to strangers on LinkedIn. And this spearheaded his entrepreneurial journey. And as he says, the rest is history. Ben is the owner of Balbert Marketing, LLC. Love that name. I could not be Drosenbaum, but I love his. He's also the creator of 5 podcasts, all under the Real Business Connections Network. And his 5 podcasts are Rochester Business Connections, Learn, Speak, Teach, Ben's Bites, 5-Minute Fridays, and Real Hits. Once an underdog, Ben is now proudly a successful entrepreneur and is passionate about helping others achieve their dreams. He is very knowledgeable in the network, marketing, and branding space, and I'm really looking forward to having him share all of his wisdom with us and all the things that he's learned along the way. So thank you, Ben. It's so wonderful to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here, Dara. I am pumped up. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm
That's right.
excited.
It's easy that you give me all the raw material. It's who you are. So I think I've seen you elsewhere described as a one-man marketing army. Is that how you see yourself?
Yeah, I'll do fractional CMO work or larger scale stuff, and that's my branding around those clients, one man marketing army. And
Mm-hmm.
I do outsource and I do have freelancers I work with,
Mm-hmm.
but we can get into this. Everything I do is client centric.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like sending them to 8 different people every time they call. I am your one man marketing army.
Mm-hmm.
I am your partner and your friend in the marketing world. And I'm there every step of the way, holding my clients by the hand. So that's the whole branding of one man marketing army.
I love it. So let's go back a little bit to the beginning, I guess, of
Let's
this.
let's
What job was it that you were working at that you were furloughed from?
Yeah, so I worked a few different roles. It's actually super complicated, so I'll keep it simple. I worked at a department partnered with the Better Business Bureau,
Mm-hmm.
and my team actually got bought out by another company.
Mm-hmm.
So I got bought out by another company, and I wasn't required to transfer, but I basically was required to transfer because I was either without a job or moving to this new company. So I moved to the new company
Mm-hmm.
and helped them establish this, team at the new firm.
Mm-hmm.
And that all happened 6 months before COVID. So I was still fresh, still getting my feet wet at this new firm.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit. So
Mm-hmm.
everything that we were building just exploded in front of our faces. And our number one service involved video production all across the United States. So
Mm-hmm.
there was no travel and no in-person video. So
Right.
basically the entire department spontaneously combusted, and I
Hmm.
found myself furloughed and out of work.
So what is it inside of you that you think led you to get from the half-empty bottle of whiskey to, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to start contacting people on LinkedIn?
I think it was actually the people that I surrounded myself with
Hmm.
that I I did the best thing that was in front of my nose. I did the first thing, and I was sloppy with it. I got on LinkedIn to look for jobs.
Hmm.
So I redid my profile, and no one was biting at that time because COVID was getting worse and worse and worse.
Right.
And, I had certain expectations of salary, commission potential, so on and so forth,
Hmm.
that no one was biting. So I pivoted. I had a music podcast for 5 years. That's another background thing. I love music, always have. And I
Mhm.
had a music show. So I knew the value of podcasting and
Okay.
conversations like this to build relationships, to learn, to network, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So I kind of just threw something at the wall, hoping that I know people say don't do that. That's exactly what I did. Threw it
Mhm.
at the wall, hope that it stuck. And I started reaching out to people saying, hey, I have this thought of starting a Rochester from Rochester, New York.
Mhm.
I wanted to go hyper local. I have this thought of starting a Rochester business podcast. Um, I'm impressed with your success. I was hoping that you'd consider being a guest.
Mhm.
And literally, like everybody said yes. Like I just
That's
kept getting
great.
yes, 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 yes,
Uh-huh.
yes. And before you know it, I had so much momentum that we did a 22 episode launch in November of 2022.
Mhm.
So a big 22 episode launch. So
Yeah.
long story short, it was the relationships I started to build in my community that fueled the fire. I didn't see myself as an entrepreneur. I didn't see myself as a business owner. But I knew that this laptop in front of me was all I needed, actually needed to run a marketing business, and I understood marketing. And it just all came together as the podcast grew and as the business relationships grew.
Mhm.
What was once maybe like a side hustle actually became my full time gig. And people say, Ben, you were born an entrepreneur. I didn't even realize that, Dara. So
Mhm.
I feel like it all happened for me, not to me. And
Mhm.
COVID was a terrible thing, but I'm so blessed that so many good things came out of it as well. So
It feels like you kind of found your niche and kind of found where you needed to be, and maybe it wasn't your decision to get there, but it sounds like it's worked out.
it did. It
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, I have a similar story I may have shared with you at some point where, after 9/11, I was let go from a firm I'd been working at for a year, and it was like, "Well, now what am I gonna do?" Like, maybe I'll go become an interior designer. I don't know. I haven't been doing this very long. I'll do something else. And, I probably would have stayed at that firm a lot longer and would not have ended up on the career trajectory that got me to, my current business partner who I've been working with for 20 years at our own firm we've had for 11. So if I hadn't had that, I mean, there's I don't see anything good about 9/11, but I think that if I hadn't had a kick or not even a kick, I was forced out of the nest. Sometimes the best things come from what doesn't seem like it could be any good at the time.
I agree. And thank you for sharing that because it's inspiring because I am a new business owner. I'm new to this role,
Mhm.
but that's the kind of story I want to tell 15 to 20 years from now. So thanks for sharing that.
I
It's
think I've
motivation for
been
me.
I appreciate that. I think I have a business coach I work with, and he's always, if I speak to him about something negative that's happening, he's like, "What's the opportunity? What's the opportunity?" And my reflex, knee jerk, always in the beginning was like, "It's not an opportunity. It's really annoying. It's aggravating. It shouldn't have happened, and I don't want to deal with it." It's like, well, that's fine. Take a deep breath. What's the opportunity? So I think your story and mine are very similar in that you said the laptop was all you needed. It also sounds like in the beginning it's all you had. I mean, you didn't have the ability to do in-person events. You didn't have the ability to go out and meet people. You had to do something that was online, like LinkedIn, and just kind of, get out there and try it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And
And
I'm blessed because the world got smaller and smaller as
Mhm.
everybody got more comfortable with Zoom and StreamYard and Teams and all these platforms
Mhm.
that I started getting meetings with people that were way out of my league, but since they were already at home at their
Mhm.
laptop in
Yeah.
their pajama pants
Yeah.
sometimes, corporate executives in pajama pants, it was easier. The world got smaller really, really quickly, and I
Mhm.
think that was a great benefit.
And the story, I mean, you're obviously making it sound fairly simple. And were there stumbles along the way? Did you run into any roadblocks that you either didn't anticipate or just had to figure out how to get around?
Wow, I mean, I feel like we could do a 5-part series on stumbles. I mean,
You do really well.
so much was happening. So, simultaneously, when I was looking for jobs, it was like it just landed in my lap, this whole entrepreneurship thing.
Mhm.
A local charter school asked me if I wanted to teach podcasting to their students.
Oh.
So I started and I taught that their first semester, and the students loved it, so they had me pick up a second class for the second semester.
Mhm.
So before you knew it, my first client was actually teaching podcasting. So I
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
even starting my firm yet.
Mhm.
Um, then as and at the time, I was receiving some unemployment benefits when I was transitioning. So eventually the unemployment's gone. and I'm making significantly less than I've made in the past 5 to 10 years.
Mhm.
Then I start getting, a little bit of hockey stick growth and I start bringing on clients, but I don't have the team or the onboarding structure, and I don't have an accounting background. I don't have an attorney or a CPA. None of that was in line because this was my first major business endeavor.
Mhm.
So without getting in the weeds, every single day was a new, pitfall, having to pivot, learn new things because, when I started, I had a couple clients just Venmo me. I had to
Mhm.
set up invoicing and payment processing and
Right.
so many of the things that, again, I don't want to get in the weeds, but it wasn't just I'm passionate about this, boom, I'm successful.
Mhm.
So many different things in the business world had to be learned, but it goes back to where we started by communicating and learning and using the podcast to connect with great business professionals. It
Mhm.
was able to kind of flatten that curve of the time it would take me to learn these things because I was surrounding myself with many mentors that would allow me to basically learn quicker and learn from them.
Mhm. And that's huge. And one of the things that I preach is, very few of us are doing something that nobody's ever done before.
Right.
So, and people are really willing to help. I mean, if you ask the questions and, hey, who do you use for this? How do you invoice? Who are you using for this? Did you get health insurance? Do you have a broker? I mean, all of those things that maybe I didn't even think about when I started a firm that we'd have to deal with, for the first, probably 5 years, I was like, oh, I'll just figure it out on my own. And then you realize that there's so many people who have done it, are willing to share about it, tell you what they did wrong, what they didn't do right, how they could have done something differently, or make a great recommendation. Like, hey, here's my, like you said, here's my CPA. He's a great guy. You got to give him a call. Or here's this attorney. She's wonderful. Give her a call. So, what you did by building the podcast was sort of have those people, right in your living room, so to speak, so that they could give you that information and mentor you without even having a formal relationship like that.
Yeah, quite literally in the spare bedroom where I'm hanging out right now.
Uh huh. It's very cool. Now, what made you kind of do that hyper local focus? Was that driven by COVID or something else?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Everyone says to niche up, and I didn't really know what my niche or my perfect place to go was.
Mhm.
But I'm born and raised in Rochester, New York. I have great love from the community. My family still lives here. I'm
Mhm.
well connected in the music industry, but crazily not in the business community at all. So I was kind of
Yeah.
rebranding myself entirely.
Mhm.
But instead of being a very small fish in an ocean,
Mhm.
I decided to be a very small fish. I didn't get bigger as a fish, but I was in the smallest pond possible.
Yeah.
So I started hyper local in Rochester, New York, knowing that if my community doesn't receive me, if my community doesn't want to work with me,
Mhm.
why would people want to work with me at scale? Why would
Mhm.
the nation pick up my message? What
Right.
is different about Ben than any other marketer? So I
Mhm.
went hyper local with my community, and I started, we had mentioned Rochester Business Connections was the first podcast.
Mhm.
Now there's 5 segments and it's called Real Business Connections, a rebrand so I have an opportunity for a more national or international reach.
Mhm.
But I started hyper local, and still to this day since I've rebranded to national, my biggest, tribe supporters, my biggest audience, my best friends and my partners are 80% local still.
Mhm.
So started hyper local, started there and started to build from that route.
I think there's a huge lesson in that, and thanks for sharing that because I think there's a huge lesson in that for people who are providing a service. I mean, obviously, if you're providing or providing goods, but if you're providing a personal service, you probably need to be, if you're a personal trainer, you probably need to be in person unless you can do something over Zoom. But if you're providing something that you could be providing to different ponds and different oceans across the world, there's a real value, it sounds like, in starting local. And, you didn't have, you were the same size fish, but you knew the pond already, and the other fish in the pond knew you, or at least would have some sort of connection to you, that sort of natural, hey, he's a Rochester guy, we went to the same high school, or I know him from softball or whatever it is.
Yeah, and
There's
I
a
want to
tremendous value in that, I think.
It is, and I wanna nerd out and flip the coin on this. So
Sure.
imagine you're, a college student and you just graduated and you're
Mhm.
in a brand new city that you went to college, but you're new there, or let's say you traveled from a different country and you just moved to America.
Mhm.
You could do exactly what I did. you would just say, "Hey, I'm brand new to town.
Mhm.
I'm looking to network and meet like-minded people. I want to elevate their voice. I want to basically promote them and
Mhm.
get to know this beautiful city while I do." I actually think that ask would be even better than, "Hey, I'm a local kid." It's like, "I'm new. I want to meet people."
Mhm.
So it doesn't have to be a podcast. It could be a blog. It could be
Right.
a video series. It could be no matter what you do,
Mhm.
if you reach out with the, "I want to get to know the city. I want to learn from you. I think you're brilliant." And you come with that open heart.
Mhm.
I feel like you could build a brand anywhere in the world if you focus on that local environment first. So I challenge anybody. I almost wish I wasn't from Rochester because I'm very confident that I could go into any city in the world
Mhm.
and do just that. Get hyper local and then expand from there.
And I think that that's a great message because obviously not everybody is in their hometown
Right.
and, not everybody is, but I think what you're saying, yes, go in there with that open heart, but I think obviously what comes across from you is how genuine you are and how earnest you are about that email or that LinkedIn message saying, "Hey, I really admire what you're doing. I'd love to learn more. I'd like to amplify your voice." However you want to say it, I think it just has to be genuine. You can't send out hundreds of impersonal emails with no emotion behind them and saying,
No.
like, "Hey, let's connect. I'm new to town." I think there has to be a genuine interest there because I think that really does come through.
Yeah. It's as simple as, and no one likes doing research, right? Do 30 seconds of research.
Mhm.
If you're on LinkedIn as an example, read their profile. A lot of the people I connected with first, I was connecting with people I went to school with. So I didn't know them, but we both went to SUNY Brockport.
Right.
So we would connect. "Hey, I saw you went to SUNY Brockport. Congrats on business ownership, blah, blah, blah."
Mhm.
If it's an email, look at their website, see
Right.
if there's something in their bio.
Mhm.
Actually connect at a genuine level, and
Yeah.
you'll send less messages,
Mhm.
but you'll get a better response rate, and you're starting the relationship off well that way. So
And you mentioned LinkedIn. Did you start most of the relationships on LinkedIn, or were you using other avenues as well?
LinkedIn was my go-to when I started.
Mhm.
I stuck to one thing. That's another thing. I believe as a marketing guy, you want to be omnipresent. You want to be able to be found in lots of places,
Mhm.
but people often get overwhelmed with that. When I started, I was laser focused on just LinkedIn,
Mhm.
and I spent hours a day just on LinkedIn, and that's kind of how I built my community and friendships and partnerships.
No, so it was just LinkedIn, just Rochester to begin with?
Correct.
Okay, so to really two specific focuses, specific avenues, specific geographically.
There was just LinkedIn, just Rochester, just SUNY Brockport alumni.
Okay. Yeah.
So I did send kind of canned messages, but
Mhm.
since I had such a target,
Right.
I didn't have to. Everybody was in that tiny little segment of people.
Right. But there you were sending the SUNY Brockport Rochester message to these people
Yes,
as opposed to, you weren't doing a batch of, one, it was SUNY Brockport and people who were in advertising and people who were in small businesses. You were targeting specifically who you wanted with that, what you're calling a canned message.
yeah, the perfect guest for my show, and it wasn't automated. I did it myself.
Mhm.
But since I had that category, it was easy not to get bogged down and have to spend minutes and minutes or hours on research because
Mhm.
everybody fit there. Then it
Mhm.
was just, let's see if we connect on a personal level. And if we do, I'll love to have you on the show. And
Mhm.
yeah, the rest, I've never actually thought about this. I did, it was a lot more refined than I realized.
Mhm.
I
And I
was
think
just,
a huge lesson because anybody can do that. I
right.
mean, anybody can search on LinkedIn for whatever, whether it's the city they're from, the city they live in, the city that they're going to, and then some connection. So it's, where somebody went to school is a great one because, you know, not, you may find people in Chicago who went to SUNY Binghamton, and
Mhm.
that may be a smaller group, but it might be a very powerful group for you to connect with.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did you ever expand it I mean, with those LinkedIn messages, did they ever go beyond the SUNY Brockport circle, or is that sufficient for you to get where you wanna go?
Well, I started with SUNY Brockport. A big thing that I did is I always asked my guests for, I used to call them recommendations,
Mhm.
referrals. Now I use the word nominations. I
Okay.
love the term nominations. So it'd
Mhm.
be, Dara, you brought so much value today. You probably know great people, obviously. Is there
Mhm.
anyone you would nominate for the show? So I started with this SUNY Brockport community and then got nominations and the nominations. And then you're talking to people all over the place.
Mhm.
And I use the same strategy for multiple things. So one thing I'm trying to do is guest on more podcasts. So now I'm kind of connecting with other podcasters
Mhm.
and having them on my show, getting on their show, things like that. So I took again the SUNY Brockport concept to the podcast host concept.
Mhm.
And now sometimes I'm not a good fit for a podcast, but since I'm guesting and I'm networking a lot, I can make good nominations for better fits than me. So again, it's all getting hyper personalized and then building a community around that hyper personalization.
It's also very generous. I mean, I think I love
Yeah.
hearing that from you. It's very generous to say, you know, I'm an okay guest for you, but there's actually somebody who's even better. And then
Yes.
you're making a connection for somebody else that may be really valuable for them.
Yeah. Yeah. What goes around comes around. You know
Mhm.
that.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So we've covered a lot of the networking. Now, how do once you get the clients and once you make those connections, what are you doing for them from a branding perspective or a marketing perspective? What's your approach?
Yeah. So I like to joke that I ask questions for a living.
Hmm.
And the podcast is obvious. It's all about asking questions, listening, being intuitive. But marketing, I feel like it really is a question game. So
Hmm.
there's a lot that we can do. I mean, we can do everything from logo design to web design to social media to strategy. There's a
Hmm.
lot of things we can do. And I have a lot of partners that I can refer if I'm not a good fit. So it's all about asking the right questions. So I like to give the analogy. Let's say you were to go to a personal trainer and they were an expert at working your left arm.
Hmm.
So you're working your left arm, but they don't know how to work your right arm or do your shoulders or your legs or diet or exercise or mindset. You'd think
Very
they were
specific.
crazy.
Yeah.
And, maybe it's an overgeneralization, but a lot of marketers act that way. I have the golden ticket. I have the solution that works in every scenario.
Hmm.
Come and do this. And then people spend a ton of money on marketing, but they're only doing pay per click and their website stinks or the pay per click isn't leading to actual conversions or so I like to look at things holistically.
Hmm.
That's a whole long-winded way of saying I ask questions for a living, that it's all about sitting down and spending more time than anyone expected on discovery
Hmm.
to ask good questions and see exactly where those weak points are. It's not just working the left arm, it's working the whole body.
Hmm.
And then looking at that full perspective of where I can actually come into their business life and serve them. And then again, I'm weaker at certain parts of marketing than others. So
Hmm.
then it's making recommendations if they need something that's a little bit out of my strong suit as well.
Hmm. That's a great answer because I think that it provides a lot of lessons for people in terms of whether they're going to work with you or somebody else. What do you want to see from a professional for them to learn about you? And I mean, I'm sure if somebody comes to you and says, you know what, I really only want to work my left arm, that's something that you could accommodate, but you can also show them the blind spots about, like, listen, there's other parts of the body, there's other aspects of fitness that you want to get into. It just to kind of continue that analogy.
I love that continuation. Oh my gosh. You're spot on.
Thank you. Thank you. So, is there a particular niche that you like to get into, a particular size of company? Because I think some people hear, I brought on a marketing agency and they think they need to be of a certain size at a certain revenue, and then it's going to be a very long, very expensive commitment. So is that something that we can disabuse people of that notion in terms of what the commitment's going to look like and at what point you can bring on a marketing agency or marketing person?
Sure. So I don't have an industry niche yet.
Hmm.
I look for personality types.
Hmm.
So I'm new to business ownership. I'm honest with that. I'm 30 years old. I have a ton of time to build my business. So I
Hmm.
want to work with growth hungry, driven people that care about growth and care about, understand the value in marketing and understand that it's an investment. So I want to work with hungry, growth oriented people with a ton of potential because that's how I see myself.
Hmm.
So saying that, I don't work with a-holes
Okay.
and I don't work with anyone who's going to demean or make me feel little or just use me as I want someone that we can hold each other by the hand and go to the promised land together. So
Hmm.
that's any small to medium sized business from some of my services like logo design are good for maybe a one person show,
Mhm.
but the sweet spot's probably 3 to 10 or more employees with,
Okay.
again, massive growth potential because I want to work with people that I know, like, and trust. It goes both ways. This is a business partnership for me. So if I'm working with the right people, I can do exactly what you do and build a foundation that'll last me 10, 20 plus years.
Mhm.
But I can only do that if I have clients that we're growing together, ideally clients for life.
Mhm. And I like the idea that it goes both ways, that they have to know, like, and trust you, but you really need to know, like, and trust them.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I honestly, I don't even care if they like me. I'm there to provide results,
Mhm.
but if I don't like them,
Mhm.
I don't like working. Again, I prefer if they like me, but I
Right.
don't care if they like me. But I
Okay.
will not work with them if I don't like them. That is tremendously important to me. I
Mhm.
worked with someone who is incredibly unethical, and
Mhm.
I'm never going to go that route again.
I think that's a brave thing to say as a new business owner, because I think that there's an inclination, and I see it with my clients sometimes, where it's, we just need the deal. We'll take the deal. It's like it's let's talk it through. Listen, if you want the deal and you're going to do it no matter what, fine. But let's talk about, maybe turning things down that aren't the right opportunity for you at the right time, because it's going to, strain your resources, or leave you working with people you don't want to work with, or you take you into the segment of the market that you're not comfortable in yet. So I think the idea of being discriminating and discerning about who you want to work with, and kind of having that real focus on not only your ideal client, but your, absolutely I will not work with client, is a brave thing to do, and probably really important, because I think that all too often people fall into that trap of, I just need the client. I don't really care. I'll suck it up and deal with it. And I could see how that would be really draining to work with somebody who's unethical.
And it is draining, but it's really difficult. If I took on any client, I would have far more revenue today.
Mm-hmm.
I would have more revenue in my business quicker,
Mm-hmm.
but if my foundation isn't strong, is it going to stand the test of time? Am I going to
Right.
go crazy, get miserable? Uh, Part of what I love about being a business owner is I get to call the shots and I don't have to appease a client that's a jerk. I don't want to work with jerks. But
Mm-hmm.
what stinks is the revenue in my pocket is not what it could be. But
Right.
I'm confident that I'll have a foundation that long term it'll be far more sustainable.
And I think there's a lot to be said about reputation. And especially when you're talking about a hyper local market. I'm an attorney in New York. There are, you can't walk across the street without dozens of attorneys in New York. But I always say that the business is all too small at all the wrong times. So if you've been a jerk, or you've been unethical, or you have acted in bad faith, people are going to hear about it. So I think that in an area like you, where if you got a reputation for working with somebody, anybody, everybody, you're going to have that reputation of, he'll work with anybody, but, hey, he works with this guy and he's not great. And he works with that guy and he's really unethical. And I think that that hurts you ultimately.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. It's different. I was a salesperson back in the day and I would just get sales
Right.
and then send it off and have bad pays and terrible situations
Mhm.
that me and the sales team honestly didn't care about.
Right.
And I still lose sleep thinking about how I was back then. As
Hmm.
a business owner, this is our brand. This is our livelihood. This is our
Hmm.
reputation.
Right.
Let's live to the highest standard because there's marketers everywhere. There's
Right.
attorneys everywhere.
Hmm.
But we want to be the best, right?
Right. And your approach seems so personal and so individualized, that you're going to sit down for that discovery call that's a lot longer than somebody might expect. And I could see not wanting to be in a meeting or on the phone with somebody for a really long time when you don't, listen, like you said, they don't have to like you maybe, but I think you certainly want them to respect you, and you want to
Yes.
have that partnership and that long-term relationship where you're investing in them and they're investing in you. So I could see not wanting to choose somebody who right off the bat you're going, no, I don't think this is going to work out. It'll put money in my pocket, but I'm not going to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Red flags.
it definitely is. You see some of those red flags. You definitely do. You
Yeah.
definitely do. How do you help a new business, like, or whether it's a 3 to 10 person employee business, kind of how do you help them with that branding? How do you help them focus on who they want to be and how they want to be seen?
Yeah, so I do have partners that are better than I am at brand identity and value statements and that segment. So I do have recommendations if they still don't quite know who they are.
Mhm,
Usually the clients I work with have a great idea of who they are and what they want to who they want to serve.
mhm.
Um, and it's my job to make sure they're making a good first impression online.
Okay.
So it always starts with a Google search. And when you do the Google search, is there a Google My Business profile set up? What does it look like? Are all the functions working? Make sure that when people look them up or get a referral, especially that they receive that call, then you go deeper into the website. Is the
Mhm,
website a great reflection of their values?
mhm.
They might be a suit and tie business person, but their website looks like they're in their pajamas all day. It doesn't represent them properly.
Yeah.
So the Google, the website,
Mhm,
and then once you have that established, now we can start building out social media channels and LinkedIn but we need to start with the foundation. So
mhm,
does the first impression they make align with their services? And
mhm,
if not, we have a problem to solve because my assumption is they're best in class, great quality, great customer service, great service.
mhm,
But if their online first impression doesn't show that,
mhm.
it feels kinda icky, and they're losing customers every day.
Yeah, and I think it's very generous to share that because it's something that people can look at even before they have a conversation with you to say, "Listen,
Right.
if I were my own potential client, what would I be seeing online when when I tried to contact this business? What does the Google My Business look like? What does the website look like?" And I think that taking that kind of hard, just honest approach to looking at what you're putting out there is a great thing for everybody to do, even before they reach out to somebody like you, because then you can kind of have a sense going to the conversation with you. These are the things that we don't like the way we're coming across.
Agreed,
Yeah, I
agreed,
think, I
and
think that's a
people can
great.
do it themselves, or well, you can do it with me or anyone who knows just a little bit about online stuff.
Mhm,
I know personally, I don't charge anybody just to talk about their business.
mhm,
It's when we get into implementing, and especially implementing long term,
mhm,
that there's going to be, a budget in place and an investment, but Google yourself. And if you need a second eye, have your friend Google you.
mhm.
Have me Google you. But yeah, I agree. We're doing ourselves a disservice if we're not paying attention to how we show up online.
And that's so basic and something I think that too many
Yeah.
people overlook. So thank you for sharing that. It's a good first step people can do right when they finish listening to this podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even
But
right
I
now.
think we could spend, like you said, we could do a 5-part series on, fumbles. We could do a 5-part series on, on marketing, on networking. I'd love to have you back because this conversation could go on forever. But
Thank
before we
you.
close, I wanted to ask you sort of the question I ask everybody. What's one thing that you've learned along the way that you'd wish you'd learned earlier?
Okay, so this is far reaching,
Hmm.
but the best time to start is years ago. The next best time to start is now.
Mm,
And I took a bunch of personality tests in the past year, and basically everything says that I should be an entrepreneur. My coach says I should have been an entrepreneur.
mhm,
I fell into entrepreneurship. Again, COVID happened for me that I was able to find my vision of where I wanted to go with my career,
mhm,
but I didn't realize it, and I wish that I did
mhm.
5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah. But like
And
you said, you can't go back. So all you can do is go forward.
right,
Yeah.
right. So if there is anything that was interesting in this conversation or any of the conversations you listen to on this podcast,
Mhm,
don't just turn the podcast off and go into your normal day.
mhm,
Implement at least one thing because the best time to implement it is the moment you hear it. Take some notes, rewind, re listen, because we're saying this at the end here.
mhm.
Implement it today because the best time to start's now. A lot of the information we're talking about today, I wish I had known 5 years ago.
Right.
Now that I've discovered it, I want the world to know it, but I want the world to actually implement it as well.
Mhm. And I think one of the lessons I've taken away from our conversation, and there've been many, but one of the ones I'm thinking of is you don't have to know it all and have it figured out right in the beginning. Start.
Yeah.
So, you started with, like you said, just LinkedIn, just SUNY Brockport, and a real hyper focus. And you didn't have it all figured out. You hadn't lined up all your professionals. You didn't know what the business was going to look like. You didn't kind of know what direction it was going to take necessarily. You knew you had passion. You knew you wanted to help locally. You knew you had a podcast. if you had waited, I think, to figure out that you were going to have, a marketing focus and that you're going to be able to do this type of work for these type of people with these type of engagements, I think it would have probably taken you a lot longer to get started.
I want to put a quick exclamation point on that because a lot of salespeople and marketers say to make a top 100 list, and
Mhm.
that's a whole different story. It's not bad advice, but my top 100 list was the first 100 people to reply to me. So it's
Mhm.
not like I did all this research to find the perfect client before I did any outreach. I
Right.
did outreach first, and
Mhm.
then my list created itself. So that's just to put an exclamation point on your point just to get started, even if you feel like you don't feel like you're ready yet. You're as ready as you're going to be in this
Mhm.
moment.
Right.
So let's get started.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that. And I'm going to steal a question from you, and I'm going to ask you for a nomination because it sounds to me like you know all kinds of people, and I'd love to have a nomination from you for someone to appear on my podcast.
Do we want to do it now or do we want to do it?
You know what?
I'll
Give it some thought, and you can let me know, and I will share it when I share the episode, so that people can look, ahead of time, and I can make that invitation for them to appear on the podcast.
Well, we're going to do two things. So I want to shout out my buddy Andrew Biernat. He has his own podcast. It used to be called Build Your Business Better. He just rebranded to Your Personal Brand, Personal Growth Podcast. And
Okay.
he's a partner on a new project I'm working on. So I know he's a great guest. But after we're done recording, I want to ask a couple follow-up questions so I can
Sure.
see who's a perfect fit. Because I want my nominations to be exactly what you need.
You really are the question guy, huh?
Yes.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you, Ben. You have been very generous with the information, and I think the perspective and advice has been wonderful. And I really do think we should do a follow up because I think there's just so much more to explore about all the things that you've learned and all that you can offer. So,
Sign
thank
me
you
up.
so much, and look forward to seeing you again.
Same.